All right, and joining me in studio now is education policy expert, Dr. Evelyn Chepkemei. Thank you so much for coming in. Lots to talk about, but I think if we draw our focus to the 2021 KCSE results and just some of the figures that we had alluded to in terms of the performance. Yeah. We focus a lot on the top performers, as we should. They worked hard. But when you look at the bulk of the students, it's in that grouping of C+ and below. You know, when you read into those figures, what does it tell us?
Thank you. Thank you for having me today. You know, the idea of examinations in an education system is to help us understand how learning is taking place, okay? And so we are not just testing to see how many kids will pass, but we are also testing to see how much learning has actually taken place. So I want to believe that the examinations were actually within, within the capability of the learners and what they were expected to know. And given the fact that our exams are mostly cognitive, so they needed to know the content that they were tested in. Now, the fact that more than 50% of those kids will not be able to move to the next level as expected to higher education tells us a lot of things about the system, because I think the challenge that we have in Kenya is that we focus on exams and looking at what it means for the child, but we don't look at what it means for the system. But when we look at the system, any system that is pushing out more than half of its candidates has a problem. That it cannot be that learners are unable to master the content. The only conclusion that we can draw is that there's something very wrong with our system.
And as you mentioned, it's supposed to be looking at the learning aspect, which then brings me to the question of why then do we educate these children, right?
That's a very good question, because I think I said here earlier today that one of the things that we haven't done well as a country is that we have not really defined the philosophy of education in Kenya, that why do we educate? So, and you can actually see that confusion when we hear politicians talking about some courses are, useless. When you look at liberal education, right from Plato, Socrates, Aristotle, moving all the way to Julius Nyerere and other African, J.S. Mbiti and others, African philosophers, education, as we define it, is a medium through which a society passes its values. So it's not about STEM, and I have nothing against STEM, and I have nothing against, education preparing students for the world of work. I completely support that. But primarily, the idea of educating is so we can be able to pass values and prepare these kids for the next level of life. And traditionally, that was done through apprenticeship. Now, in our current society, we are doing it through formal education. And when we do that, and this formal education then is giving us feedback to tell us that, 53% of all the students are unable to move to the next level, then we need to go back and ask ourselves very serious questions about, what are we doing as a country? Why this kind of thing? And I don't care that, ours is the strongest education system in probably East and Central Africa, but being strong does not mean that we have arrived. There are opportunities to continue improving our system. And the first thing that we need to do is to recognize that we are not doing okay, that our system is actually broken.
I have to ask, this year it was, what, 82% who will not be able to go on to university.
Yeah.
What are their options? What next for them, if not to pursue an undergraduate degree?
It's really a challenge, and the challenge of what happens next after today, by and large, has to do with what is happening in the economy. So you can see how education then becomes a political issue, because if the economy is not doing well, It means, therefore, that these students that are not able to go to the, and even if they go to the university, once they're done with the university, is the economy strong enough to be able to create enough jobs to absorb these students? Is the business environment robust enough to be able to create opportunities for even the so-called entrepreneurs to do business? So it goes, so we move that problem from education to government as in its totality. The corruption that we see, the challenges that we have in governance and all this, you know, the debt that we now have as a country makes it impossible for our economy to grow. And when the economy doesn't grow, it does affect, you know, the education system, not only in terms of funding the education system itself, but also what happens to the kids after. We keep talking about TVET, you know, enrolling in TVET and all that. But after they enroll in TVET, where do they get the capital to start business? Who will buy their things when everybody is struggling to buy even a glass of milk? So, you know, it's a very difficult situation, but we need to sit down and converse with each other as a country so we can be able to find a solution to these problems.
And let's talk about inequalities that exist in the education system that prove to be barriers for many students to get quality education across this country. Because you'll find some counties are a bit more endowed when it comes to schools and other education resources compared to more marginalized ones, and that already is a problem. You know, what other inequalities would you say exist, and how do we start to remedy them?
You know, so we already know that there are counties that are marginalized. We're talking about the arid and semi-arid lands. There are about 16 within that category. When we talk about 16 counties, you know, we have 47 counties in the country. 16 is very close to 50% of the counties that we have. So what does that tell you? Half of the country is marginalized. That is not correct. There's something inherently immoral about that, I think. And so, by the way, when we talk about the national statistics and we talk about gender parity, for example, what we are doing is that, you know, when we talk about percentages, it gives a very general idea, but you're not able to tell the movement of that population within this bracket of that particular percentage. So the parity, the gender parity at the national level really masks very serious inequalities at the county level, between the genders, but also between, you know, families, you know, at the family level. When you look at the well-endowed counties, like, let's say, for example, my county of Trans Nzoia, or Kericho, or Uasin Gishu, or Murang'a, Nyeri, and all this, these are counties that were already taken over by the white settlers those days, and they established schools. Okay, so we have what we call the national schools, which are very well endowed in terms of the number of teachers, in terms of resources, but even in terms of governance and leadership. Who are the board members in Alliance, for example? Who are the board members in Mangu, and so on? And who are the board members in my little school of Tuigo in secondary, for example. So the disparity is not just in terms of resources, but also in terms of governance and the kind of experiences. You have cabinet secretaries sitting in boards of some of the schools, and then you have, at the very best, you know, the leading farmer in a village being the chair of the board. That there is a lot to be said about that. Okay. And so when you look at the entire broad spectrum of lack of equity in the education system, it's social, it's economical, it's gender, and sometimes there's a tribal thing there. There's an ethnic thing there, because when you look at the ASAL counties, who are we talking about? We are talking about the nomadic pastoralist communities. We are talking about the coastal region. We are talking about, you know, generally the Islamic community and so on. So these disparities really vary, but at the end of the day, you know, we are all Kenyans, and we are saying every child has the right, it's not a privilege, it's a right for them to be able to access quality education. This is a conversation that we really need to sit down around the table and seriously talk about.
Absolutely, and we have to leave it there. Dr. Jepkemei, thank you so much for your insights, and hopefully it begins that very critical conversation